There I am. InShalla and Ashe. Thanks for hanging on and tuning in today. And as always, blessings, everybody, and gratitude to you. So today I'm going to continue musing about the moon, the magic of number 8, and also throw in something to muse about for yourself. So life truly is a journey, right? And questioning everything and staying curious, putting what you're learning or experiencing into action. So since we're in the season of summer, it's the sign of the mind, it's Gemini, the element of fire and summer. And we're also about to have a square between Saturn and Uranus. And I also associate planets in astrology with the energetic centers, but also areas of the house like feng shui, right? The elemental realm. But it can get a little overwhelming. And I'm pretty sure I actually created a video on the energy centers within the home along with astrology. It's probably on YouTube, actually, if you're curious about that. But I'm going to bring in the pagan aspects into the phases of the moon: spring, summer, fall, and winter. So those are the cycles of the seasons as well, but they're out in the galaxy. And also, each of these seasons actually kind of correlates with the pagan seasons as well. So the seasons are actually based on a natural cycle that we can actually easily observe. Just like at the winter solstice, the night is as long as it can be. But after that, daylight begins to kind of gain ground and get some momentum. And the time between like sunset and sunrise, it actually begins to kind of wobble in a way, and it gets longer and longer. And at the spring equinox, daylight and darkness are of equal length. And the summer solstice brings the shortest night of the year and the longest day, which we're coming into really quickly, actually. And afterwards, the days grow shorter. And we come to another point of this equilibrium. It's the autumn equinox. So, all of this is actually naturally quite familiar. Maybe you heard about it when you were younger. It's kind of a foundation of life, the elemental realm. And also, we've all heard that the seasons actually sink deep into our collective bones and what that kind of looks like. So it's in our society that the phrase, the springtime of life, and also in Chinese medicine, the wood season is the springtime of life. So naturally, it just brings up images of vibrant youth, full of hope and possibilities and curiosities. And then the more serious resonance of the winter of life. So the moon cycle of the phases literally takes about 29 days, start to finish. So the cycle of the seasons actually takes about 365 days. And their lengths are actually different. But, we might really kind of grasp the idea how these two cycles kind of resonate with each other. And they also are different expressions of the same archetypal structures as well. So if we understand one, we have a greater understanding of the other, or we get to understand the other. And the same kind of thinking can be applied to the seasons and the lunar cycles of the month of the year. So the lock, kind of the gridlock between the solstices and the equinoxes and the phases of the lunar moon kind of actually resonate in this cool, unique fashion. So at the winter solstice, darkness is literally this triumphant. That's where the night is as long as it can be, especially in the higher latitudes of the hemisphere, actually. And even when the sun finally kind of rises, it doesn't really rise very high. So winter is the season of short, dim days, long shadows, and endless nights. So what's super cool is at the new moon, which we actually just had, there is no moonlight at all other than the eclipse of it, right? But it's the darkest night of the month. So the connection between the new moon and the winter solstice is kind of this magical and somewhat compelling, obvious, in a way. So can you imagine it any other way, really, of thinking about the two of them? So the darkest time of the month and the darkest time of the year, they're really like two mirrors reflecting and actually facing each other. So if I was to actually move this out further, if the new moon and the winter solstice have a natural symbolic link, we could actually see the system kind of clicking together with the rest of the lunar phases. And that's actually what I'm going to actually hone in and show you. And also the corresponding seasons, which in Chinese medicine, the seasons, I did the nature series a few years back, if you're curious about the elements and how that kind of comes into play magically. So opposite of the winter solstice is the summer solstice, which again, that's coming up here in a couple weeks. And that's the maximum of light. So it's in opposition to the new moon, we have the full moon. Again, that's time of maximum light, InShalla, right? Divine universe, you know, it's magical in a way, right? So you can like try the same idea and just imagine people in your mind's eye literally just dancing for joy at the summer solstice, midsummer, and then actually imagine people dancing under the magic of the full moon. Again, there's this mutual reflection, and it's just natural, and it's actually organic and easy. So if we try to dance outside in the winter solstice, actually, especially here in Utah, it's going to be really cold. It's not going to be really enjoyable, maybe freezing. And if we tried dancing outside at the new moon, we would maybe stumble and fall because it's actually too dark to do the dance. So the two equinoxes with light and dark balanced, then that actually corresponds with the first and the last quarter phases of the moon. And it actually really works. So with the lunar quarters of the light and the dark, and even balanced literally on the face of the moon. So just like daylight and darkness balances perfectly at the autumn equinox or the vernal as well, at the first quarter, we're heading towards the brightness of the full moon. So this resonates with the vernal equinox. When we're heading to the maximum light of midsummer at the last quarter, we're heading down into the dark of the moon. So there's this natural resonance with the fall equinox when we're bound for the dark and the cold of winter. So for me, as a reflector, it's really kind of fascinating as all this brings in different cultures along with different mythology or mystics. It's not only diverse, but it's endlessly evolving. So what the seasonal cycle provides is actually a closer look, kind of like a template where mythology and history is actually more structured. So it's like the return of the light and the hour of our deepest darkness, along with what's actually literally what's happening at the winter solstice. And we've been celebrating these kinds of ideas through the seasons, throughout history, time, and space. So in the pagan holiday, the holiday of Yule is Christmas. It's the seasonal places. I'm going to show you my little, there it is. I'm going to stretch it just a little so you can see, hopefully. Oh, that's not the one I want. Good thing I looked. I want this one. It's not very great. I apologize. It's not something I'm great at. But you can see the Yule over there. So the Yule on my funny little diagram, sorry, I have to turn around, but it's the Christmas, it's the seasonal place, it's the winter solstice, it's the lunar phase that actually correspond with the new moon. So it's pretty curious, actually. And approximately the date would be December 22nd. It's the holiday of Imbolc is the next one. It's midway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So it's the waxing crescent moon. This happens early February. It's the holiday of Ostara or Easter. That's the spring equinox. My son was actually born on the spring equinox. It's the first quarter of this lunar phase, March 22nd, but he's March 21st. Totally amazing. But then Beltane, you can see Beltane, that's midway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. So this is the waxing gibbous moon. It's in early May. It's midsummer. It's called Litha, L-I-T-H-A. You can see right there. So that's the summer solstice. And we're kind of actually coming up to that. and it corresponds to the lunar phase of the full moon, June 22nd. Lammas, Lammas, that's midway between summer solstice and the autumn equinox. So this is the waning gibbous moon in early August. And then we have the harvest of the home, which is Mabon, M-A-B-O-N. That's the autumn equinox. It's the last quarter of the lunar phase around September 22nd. And then we have Samhain, All Souls Eve. We've all heard of that, right? Midway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. So this is the waning crescent moon. This is late October, Halloween, early November. So now let's see how these correspond to the 8 lunar phases of the moon. So we have the new moon, which is, let me get rid of that one. There we go. I know these aren't the best images, but bear with me. So how this corresponds to the 8 lunar phases of the moon. So the new moon actually is the pagan holiday of Yule. And what does that look like, right? So the concepts of the new moon are like charisma, star quality, nurturing relationships, or qualities within self, can be seductive, leadership, a bringer of gifts or a gift giver, innocence, becoming symbolic to other people. But with all of these, there's also a shadow to each and every one of them where, every front has a back. So the potential shadow dimension of the new moon phase. So just like in winter solstice, a great power is kind of emerging into this blinding darkness. So a person born under this first phase of the lunar cycle seems to glow with this understanding that understanding is more human. So it's typically more warmth, but it transcends being human. So some charismatic wisdom, some special relationship with God universe, just depending on other aspects in the natal chart. But I just want to keep this with the moon. And the secret of happiness with the moon in this phase is it's trusting what the heart is dictating more than what makes sense, or is a reason, to just find something that ignites literally the fire in your soul and actually like hurl your life out into it. So happiness here is actually multidimensional, and you shouldn't worry too much about finding the balance. You're not about balance in this lifetime. You're about passion and having a commitment to something that feels bigger than yourself. So the next phase is the waxing crescent. It's the extremist. It's the pagan holiday of Imbolc. So the concepts here are to like drive, to accomplish, an experience. There's hunger. There's also balance, success at its cost, mind you, presence, natural authority, having an infectious hope in the face of all darkness. And who doesn't really need that, right? It's contagious when somebody is so hopeful in the dark. So this waxing crescent moon kind of dominates the evening sky. It hangs like this proverbial kind of sickle over the western horizon. It's like after sunset. So it's a really young moon, but it's actually beautiful. It's full of possibilities. So just like the new moon, which is naive, we still have this first quadrant of the cycle, and we're still dominated by the alchemy of the early stages of the waxing cycle. And we're still in winter by the pagan calendar, and we're still being in that dark hemicycle, which I talked about last week. So we're looking at the element of the otherworldly beings, or the archetypals in the other world. So we have this idealism here would literally be to enter out into the world in our pure essence. And like everything, the shadow, nothing in anything is, no good or bad or just good or just bad. So it's the consciousness and also the intention. So just always shaping the expression through different archetypes. So a possible shadow expression of the waxing crescent moon in this phase, there's a strong theme of neurosis or neuroticness and compulsiveness with this moon phase. Now, I'm not just going to focus on the shadow. I'm going to bring in the happiness of the cycle too. But maybe if the shadows come up, just tune into the happiness, re-listen, because that's kind of where all the juice is really, right? But the secret to happiness with the moon and a waxing crescent phase is actually essentially having something bigger than oneself to gift and to shape, to create purpose or direction in one's life. So there needs to be like a mission of some sort or a mission in general. It kind of feels like a cause, but the cause has to be a worthy one, or actually the energy is going to literally collapse into that neurotic, short-sighted kind of selfishness kind of state. And the mission doesn't always have to be, possess a quality of obvious altruism, as in, crusading, being a crusader for some special good cause or something. It could be art, it could be science, it could be any kind of academic kind of work, raising a family even. So really all that matters in this phase, in this happiness phase, is that the effort reflects the moon, the best part of yourself, and that somehow it's bigger than who we are right now in our whole journey on this planet Earth. So the first quarter is actually called the Crusader. It's the pagan holiday of Ostara or Easter. The concepts here are tensions between self and the group. So it's a concern with justice or battles, organizations, group efforts, sacrifices for the group, maybe, or you're abstract in some way, or kind of idealistic kind of principles of a different kind of archetype within the realm that actually collide within reality. So the first quarter of the half moon, we have that dark hemisphere and we enter into the bright one. So there's this distinction between the energetic fingerprints, the fragments of actually these two hemispheres. So the dark hemisphere is about the unmanifested realm. It's the world behind the one that we see with our senses, which is the one we share more or less with everybody else. It's in the dark hemisphere. And we encounter archetypes and actually Platonic ideals. So it's as if we're actually inside the mind of God, which is curious. And this illumination of the moon's journey, we're actually in the realm of manifestation. So to survive, we must become kind of political creatures. And the two ancient possibilities or ancient wisdoms that actually come in are between war and diplomacy. So every coin actually has two sides. Everything has a duality. So the shadow here is the positive meanings that are built into every little configuration. So it holds that every configuration can be literally turned sour with enough ignorance or fear poured in the mix, the cosmic soup. So the shadow or the potential shadow of this first quarter moon, it's like moral righteousness in its pure form, but we like to be seen. And that's where the darkness gets in. So self-righteousness can kind of be intoxicating and right, but ultimately, it has no meaning except in the context of wrong, right? So the big driver of this shadow manifestations of the third lunar phase in this crusading or crusaderness is actually self-righteousness. It can create unnecessary polarizations and actually oppositions between people and even ideas. It's like if you're not with us, you're against us. So it's not always a constructive attitude to work with. So it needs a little dose of, hey, let's meet in the middle, right? And I mean, I see that in the world today. There's a lot of separation within the separation, right? So here to meet happiness or the key to happiness or the secret with this moon in the first quarter phase is successfully actually bringing in an important principle into the manifestation. So to have somebody else's values felt in the world to have actually left a mark on the world, to have made a difference. That's actually what counts here. And also part of the secret of that happiness for first quarter people is in recognizing and really just taking joy in smaller and more like subdued kind of victories. So in this phase, what resides is the learning of how to work with other people. So it's this idea, when I say work with other people, it's in the context of their customs or their institutions. And sometimes we just need to experience the delight of our own ideas, like being out in life and actually being further improved upon or moving forward by either a committee or a group. It's like you have this massive, amazing idea and they take it further and they run with it. So the fourth phase is the waxing gibbous. This is the phase, you can see it there on my thing. It's the helper or the lover. It's Beltane. So that's the pagan holiday there. So the concept here are service identification. It's a group idea, sexual energy, joint expressions of creativity. So this is the creator audience kind of synergy. It's the support here is offered to a person or within a group, like teamwork, just being generous to work as a team, like you're all equals, partnership. So at the waxing gibbous moon, we have come to like this last phase of this waxing cycle. So it's kind of a combination that's been reached. So the waxing moon is out, it's rushing at this impulse to bring this archetypal principle into the manifestation. So it's entered it fully and it's in the bright hemisphere. I think you can see that on my little visual there, the line. But the hemisphere that represents the three-dimensional world of men and women, along with our flaws, possibilities, compromises, because we all have them, but becoming fully embodied and fully human. So in this waxing gibbous phase with the helper and the lover, the shadow phase is actually embracing in the unpleasant, the truly negative aspect of the word compromise. So in this phase, in our very open-mindedness, we can actually lose our moral compass. What does that even look like? What am I talking about, right? So it's inside of us to be non-judgmental, but we can fail to make important discriminations between that, which is healthy or which is going to make us sick. So, my moon is kind of right there, but it's kind of a full moon. It's kind of hard to decipher. I often wonder if my moon is out of bounds. And that's why I'm a reflector, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. So as I'm sticking with the moon, because I like the correspondent through the pagan as well, and maybe bring in those aspects. But what happens when we lose our ability to compromise or to discriminate and we get on this moral injustices basically to ourselves, what happens is we can enter into contracts that are hard to exit. And I've felt this before. It can be relationships, habits, professions, communities, anything like that. And you're actually vulnerable to being negatively impacted by inappropriate sexual partners. And when I say inappropriate, I'm not talking about dirty words and tattoos. I mean spiritually inappropriate, as in the partners who are just simply unworthy of us or otherwise just bad for us in general. So the secret of happiness with the moon in this waxing gibbous phase is very much connected with lively, surprising, and meaningful relationships. So partnerships play a huge role. So do your friends. So do appropriate and engaging teachers of all types, where we experience joy and uplifting when we're part of a vibrant collective, especially if we can play a helpful role within that. So our happiness is almost enhanced in this waxing gibbous phase. So if we can also see a correspondence you know, when we look into someone's eyes, like I always like to make eye contact. You know, when you look into someone's eyes and when they see your face coming around the corner, you know, we need to feel loved and appreciated. So in a nutshell, for this one, the secret to happiness is that you cannot do it alone. So, and that is so true. Nobody makes it alone. I'll totally agree with that. And then the fifth phase, as we go over the horizon there, that's the full moon. It's the human being. It's the pagan holiday of Litha, Litha. So the concept here is committed or inescapable involvements of all kinds of things, complexities, divorce, lifelong bonding, wedlock, as in deadlock, caregiving, art, creativity made manifest. So it also, you know, as it goes over right there at that horizon is also the seventh house. So I found it kind of curious that divorce kind of was with the full moon on the opposing. Because that is the partnership house. If I was looking at the moon sitting in the seventh house, I guess. So that was curious. So, so it's like this, like, I don't know, did I already say wedlock is deadlock? That's kind of the feeling that comes through. It's, you know, it's caressing through art, creativity, making it become manifest, nurturing outward. It's the expression of light and even darkness. Or, you know, it's kind of that damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of drama. And you can expect more reflectiveness here at the full moon, right? Because the moon reflects. And we can also find ourselves at this extension out into the world. So, you know, in Chinese astrology, as well, there's this, the cycle of life, the phases of life, the human life cycle. So this is the fifth phase in this, the lunarity of the moon going around the cycle. So, you know, we're now like the resident with the natural psychology, like we are heading into midlife and also spiritual crises as you go through space and time, you know, midlife crisis, they call them. I don't think I ever had one. I'm kind of disturbed about that. Kidding, totally. But the naivety, to be naive here, the naivety is the demon that stalks into this waxing cycle. So the demons that we start to face in this aspect are feelings of defeat and despair, hopelessness. So in understanding the full moon, it's actually important to remember that we are only at the beginning of the waning cycle. So those little demons are going to be stronger later. So as different expressions of different, you know, aspects of being naive start rising at the new moon, beyond the duality of the waxing and the waning, the full moon. So we're at the midpoint of that bright hemicircle. We're like right across from the new moon. So this gives us some insight. What was mainly felt in the past is actually now seen. So we're also at this point, we're kind of enmeshed. We're like in it, in our own creation. And the new moon, the vision, is actually accelerated out into the world. So it's the birth. That's kind of how I see the new moon, the birth. It's the spring, even though it's associated with the winter solstice. I'm just musing on the Chinese elements. But as we, you know, we put this out into the world, having compromised and been compromised, it's fully what it is. You know, with all your warts and your croniness and your witchiness and all. So in other words, it's the choices we make that actually bind us. It's like jumping out of an airplane, you know, after you've done it, second thoughts, they might come in, but what are you going to do about it? So when relating to the lunar phase into midsummer, it's also, you know, it's good to recognize the sense of peaking that arises. And what happens in this phase is the days are long and they're also warm. People are more social. There's festivals, there's concerts, you know, relationships are forging through. So everything is brought into the visible manifestation, like the tangibles, what I almost wanted to say. And again, nothing is easier to escape than it was to enter. So that goes for careers, responsibilities, even addictions, relationships, good or bad, on all things, habits, even self-created health issues, you name it. So now the shadow side is, remember jumping out of the airplane? Well, you really have done it. So now once you take that first big step, gravity and luck are holding all the aces. Your skill is, it's significant, but it's in third place. So what does that look like? You're up and actually you're headed down. So you kind of have to just deal with it. So people born under the full moon constantly feel the same underlying mood. So it's a sense of this inevitable debility, a sense of faith or destiny. It's the feeling that life is kind of a runaway train in a way, a feeling of endless improvement. And of course, one of the possible shadows here is this, it's a manifestation or a feeling of entrapment or a sense of paralysis in a way. It's like the deer in the headlights. So this can lead to feelings of disassociation from the immediate reality and the darkest expressions. But, as always, there's also the secret to happiness, because there's always two sides of the coin. So for those that are born under the full moon, and I'm right at that cusp, it's the sense of jumping in wholeheartedly, jumping out into your life, not being intimidated by it, to be bold enough to love as if you have never been hurt before, and also to attempt to live your dreams and all of your aspirations. But you have to feel some mechanism with your self-expression. So there's this feeling that you have to leave something of what you thought was sacred or important or beautiful or whatever that is behind in the world. So it could be a painting, it could be a novel you've written, it could be actually anything that brings, you've subscribed to, of course, my virtues, peace, joy, and happiness, right? So just knowing that any of those circles that benefit and radiate like a spiral outward from the act of inner kindness, that actually radiates outside of our beingness. And we're actually limitless. So the happiness in this lunar phase is actually also dependent upon recognizing situations that are truly stuck in the mud. Stuff that you can't get past, you can't amend them to any, real evolution, and resolving not to kind of prolong them in any way. Because, ultimately we don't want to create more karma in our story on planet Earth. You don't want to do that, right? But at least it's a different kind of karma, because the drama that actually moves forward as part of the how we evolve in the serving of life is gratitude, right? But drama that goes nowhere except literally back to square one serves only a darker lord, I'll say, or a darker king or queen. So time put in to end it is, you have to end it with zero regrets. You just, have to forgive and forget, basically. That's what this solar eclipse was all about, is the forgiveness and the forgetting, and just forget, flick it away. Okay, so the sixth phase is the waning gibbous. That's the shaman phase, the pagan holiday of Lammas, Lammas. So the concepts here are, for me, it feels shaman-like. So it's, it's our shadow side. It is that deep inner work. It's acceptance. It's surrender. It's carrying a poignant sense of the brevity of life, like you're being brave. Psychic intervention, even, or others' lives. You're assisting around death and dying and crisis, as a career, maybe. And also loving relationships, attunement into worldly wisdom or otherworldly wisdom, death and rebirth, gratitude, the attitude of gratitude, and even loss, the loss of self-importance within ourself, and even having a perspective that's actually wise or mature in a way. So this wanting part of this lunation cycle literally begins the moment of the full moon when it's actually established, like it's at its peak. So this is when literally you're like on your homeward journey. It's actually kind of underway, heading back towards the realm of spirit, God, or whatever you want to call it, great spirit. So you're closer to death than you are to birth. And this doesn't actually mean physical death. It's like stuff is always forgiving and moving forward. So we feel this reality in our bones, which is curious enough. Our ancestors, it's the earth, it's the earth star below our feet. We've turned towards home, towards eternity. Something is actually going to welcome us. And that welcoming actually changes our orientation. But this is only half of the puzzle piece. So this, when you're looking at my little, I don't know if you can tell, but we're still in this bright side of this hemicircle. So we're extended outward into the realm of manifestation. We're caught up in our relationships. Maybe there's different structures that we've created. Maybe we're simultaneously focused out on the outward social world and also eternity. So, kind of think of a CEO of a company. They're always seeking the larger framework of life, but they're actually still engaged with others as well. But you're also becoming less engaged with your own personal hopes, needs, and dreams. So at this phase, we need the authentic connection, like sitting around, having conversation, breaking bread, being in community. You're with sacred souls or kindred spirits or whatever you want to call it. But here, the potential shadow in this dimension of this wanting givius phase, it's where there's this affirmative soul intention that's built into every phase or aspect or configuration. And what happens is it can turn into a calamity with, laziness or spiteful people, right? So there's a lot of root issues in here. They're actually kind of simple to grasp onto. So if we're assuming that everything in life is meaningless except for like appetite, that we're simply our physical bodies, that when we die, the lights go out, then we have this terrible moral veracity inside of us. We want money and we don't care how we get it, kind of thing. We want sex and we don't care who we hurt. We want fame or power, mostly because we believe that's going to lead or enable us to get more sex and money. So the shadow side in this aspect here, it's that compassion is banished. We've lost it. So the human imagination becomes tragically constrained in this dire situation. You're like, I'm thinking of a hamster stuck on the wheel. So we're still into relationships under the domain of the shadow, but they become this chilling line. It's kind of drudgery, right? But again, there's still the secret of the happy side, the other side of the moon. And in the wanting givius phase, in a nutshell, this is to live every day as if it was your last day on earth. It's kind of lofty, right? And, some people think it's unreachable. But when you live as if it's the last day, your entire perspective changes. And the wisdom in the words of that is actually it's following the North Star. And that's the star that these people need to follow. And when they realize that how brief time really is on earth, the entire perspective and perception shifts and changes. You stop worrying so much about the trivial pursuits, the motivations, the creation of purpose, meaning, and they begin to replace these endless, almost there kind of satisfaction, appetite satisfaction. So when you reach this phase, your own self-importance becomes diminished. And the inevitable, when life feels slighted or out to get you or unfair, or the insults, those just become background noises. It's like little gnats and you're just flicking them away. So being authentic or finding your own inner authenticity, which is in the Dagara, that's the nature realm, authenticity, that's just having a genuine human connection and a sense of just being in the power of the now, being in the moment. Um, and even larger than life. And that's when the essence of your spirit self actually thrives. And then you kind of begin to joke that makes, you can have conversations with angels, right? You make those funny jokes. So the last quarter, the pilgrim, the pagan holiday of Mabon, you can see that there. The concepts here are sensing the smell of home, belonging. It's sweet and sorrow and longing. It could be a romantic tragedy, solitude, art as an inner searching, or service, theater, graceful endings. It's even the art of saying goodbye, or the air of death and the finality of your existence in the world. So a corner's turned here as we've entered the moon's last quarter. We're heading, right? So, it's resting your weary eyes. We've returned to the dark aspect of that hemicircle, the split in half, and we're leaving the realm of the manifest and the outward. So we begin to disentangle ourselves from the visible world, the realm of objects, people, community, institutions, and whatnot. So this is where consciousness literally gets directed inward, away from all those unexpected serendipity distractions, shared experiences. All the material detail gets lost. The three-dimensional reality of other people literally starts dissipating. And replacing it's vastly more graphic. There's a sense of a realm from which all of the ideas and the images arise. So this is really, it's the holy of holies in the phases. It's kind of interesting. I don't visit here, but if you happen to have your moon in this phase. So now we're literally riding this surging wave. We're surfing this waxing cycle. We're surfing it out into the world. And actually everything is different. And we're carrying back, just like a surf, just like a wave, we're carrying this wave back inward of the moon's, this waning cycle. So the resonances here are with old age, not with youth and enthusiasm. So again, it reminds me of Chinese medicine. When we go from metal into water, water is the wisdom, it's the old age. So just being naive here, the naivety of being naive is tempered. So we're closer to our inner wisdom. We are wise. We're like a sage, but we're also tired, right? And also the foolishness, that's where you recognize the foolishness, being a fool. That's the soul's enemy, and it's the dark part of this waxing cycle. Now the enemy becomes the resignation, it's the despair. And again, the shadow here is nothing is good or bad. But what the dimension in this last quarter phase is when someone is born under this phase, with what demons they have to wrestle, if they're going to manifest the actual soul's intention, the fourth enemy here of man, of knowledge, is actually the most mysterious one. It really is old age. But we have to battle the demons of resignation or resigning. So how do we live with unfair realities? The worst answer, one bad answer, is cynically, the cynic, right? Taking refuge in the cynicism. And I have a client, he's very cynical, but this is just a trap for people born under the moon's last quarter. But the secret of happiness in the seventh phase lies primarily in the inner world. So this is like a mechanism of transcendence. So as we put earlier, you have to master your energetic release, your creativity, create an effective ritual. All of this can contribute to a sense of well-being, a deeper attention to the present moment. And when you commingle that with acceptance that all things must pass, or this too shall pass, it eases the mind. And then what happens, we have this outward, this main element is like outwardly in cleaning up the endings where we must finish the business of the unfinished business. As long as people allow it, and somebody, they don't want to go through the workings of forgiveness when they don't allow it, just knowing inside of you that you genuinely, gratefully tried, that's literally enough to allow for the release of the past. But the cornerstone of happiness in this last quarter phase, it's in penetrating the illusion of significance that we attach to, we create these stories or a diagnosis in other people, especially other people who have hurt us or offended us. Most of the time, literally, they have no idea what's in our heart or in our mind, and similarly, we accept our own ignorance about theirs. That's kind of what goes on with this phase. And now we are at the last phase. So this is the waning crescent. You can see it there. The ghost, the mystic wanderer. So this is the pagan holiday of Samhain or Halloween. It's the concept here. They're deep psychic sensitivities, possibly imbalance, alternate descriptions of reality, hypersensitivity, ghosts, spirits, visitations, creative visionary. You have I'm trying to think of a very creative imagination through vision, dream state, right? Awareness of your ancestors, the dead, ghosts, those clean, definitive endings. So for me, this kind of feels like the moon being in the 12th house. So this is the circle where it's actually closing. We've actually come to the last phase of the lunar cycle after a long, dark night. Maybe the moon is like feeble and it's rising to the east. And as soon as it's washed out by the rising sun, from the moon's point of view, not the sun or the earth, we've reached kind of the end of days. And of course, also in the cyclical fashion of paganism, it's reached the threshold of a new beginning. So the moon will actually disappear into the invisible realm. It's kind of an archetypal realm in a way. But here in this phase 8, the whole system is actually winding down. It's taking a breath, taking a pause. So whatever the first mystery might be at the waning crescent moon, we're rushing headlong into it at this phase. It's like you've gone over the waterfall. You're surrendering to the tug of the magical, mystical current. So the bright semicircle that was dominated by the full moon represents the material world. But now we're far, far away from all of that in this waning crescent. So we've literally turned our backs on the physical world, almost to the point where we've forgotten that it's even there. And the key to this aspect is actually reflecting upon the moment of the new moon. So in itself, it's an epitome of all of this enigma that goes on. And we go beyond anything we can even comprehend in the logical world and this three-dimensional world. So it's like the Big Bang of modern cosmology. In a burst, the event gives this ride, this wave out into the physical universe, and also all those laws of the universe that kind of govern the laws. So how does it even look from the perspective of a wise old man or a wise old woman? So the more you can intuit an answer to the question, the more deeply you're going to understand the positive phase of this waning crescent moon. It's questions like, what is reality actually? So intuitively, this 8th phase, or people born under the 8th phase, they understand that reality as a word is actually misunderstood. It's a simplified word. So actually, in a social contract that allows human society to exist and human conversations to happen, but that social contract also dilutes us all. It's encouraging us collectively to frame mystics as harebrained, or crazy. Dream lives are just dreams. And apparitions say, maybe you see ghosts or the spirit world, that's just playing a trick on you. It feels kind of like the Twilight Zone. So the potential shadow dimension of this phase, the wanting crescent phase, it's stated as madness. So if you feel like you're going mad, that's the phase here. It's, you know, it's this most dramatic, dark possibility, really, that's naturally not the most common one, but people born under this phase can actually lose their grip not only on reality, but also on the fabric, the actual fabric of the subtle and transcendental realities, which really have their own laws and even their own logic. So losing their grip on any reality at all, except their own inner demons, people born under this last lunar phase can slip by degrees just watching them into, you know, frightening states of awareness. So they sense a defeat of impossibility in their human partnerships, surrendering to them in this soul cage in a way. But as they all have, they also have their happiness. So what's cool about this one is the happiness in this last phase is actually the mystic wanderer or the ghost that lays hidden. I like to say the ghost in the darkness. I use that term quite often. So it's in this domain of the psychic landscape. So to be happy, they need a rich, active kind of solitude. Just simply spending time alone can actually assist them. But better still is time spent in meditation, dream work. You can do your own inner yoga, create your own inner yoga. You know, just being cautious of your own, or conscious even, of your inner landscape can lead to self-absorption too, which can actually spiral down into that, you know, self-pity, despair. So you need a true spiritual practice that is the most effective medicine for you. So positively, or positivity, we must become kind of a ghost in this world, knowing that, you know, we're all going to leave planet Earth soon. Nobody gets out of Earth school alive. So just practicing this perspective every day, in recognizing that our true identities, our authenticity, really that's our only true home inside of us. And it's more luminous, you know, that luminosity, the emptiness that kind of gets in our minds. You know, that's kind of a higher frequency vibration to be in than anything material or even the cognitive mind. So memory here is intense and raw. So a person born under this phase needs to learn to balance those deeply felt presence of the past, even past lives. You know, you kind of have to cultivate more of a detachment from it, as if it's nothing more than a dream or a movie. And a spiritual practice is going to help assist with that as well. So if you go deeply enough into yourself, you come out into the universe. It reminds me of, I have a book, The Galaxy. Oh gosh, I can't find it. I know you know it. The Handbook Guide to the Galaxy or something like that. So people that are born under the wanting crescent phase, truly meditation is really the ultimate key to a sense of not just well-being, but sanity and happiness. So this was pretty long, kind of long. I don't know how you felt about it, but I'm actually really getting into the phases of the moon, along with the paganism aspects and where that fits into a chart. And tomorrow, be sure to join my BlockBuster Show with my guest. I'm super excited about that. I'm going to continue doing the BlockBuster Show and bringing other people on. I think that'll give more insight to different modalities that are out there. So if you have somebody you'd like to have on the show, be sure to reach out, let me know. And as always, InShalla and Ashe, blessings to you, and I will see you on the other side.